And good morning, it's Saturday, so it's the weekend, so I expect a little bit different on the vlog, and I think we'll do one today and we'll do one tomorrow. But in this session we're going to talk about property more than anything. So yesterday I had to buy some carpet, you know, just totally living a dream, as you do, and in fact spent £3,500 on carpet. Now, I know that's a lot of money. Well, I think it's a lot of money anyway, but we ended up with two houses carpeted for that. One of them's going to go up for sale, and then the other one's going to get rented out, and we've increased the rent. I don't know what we've increased the rent by, 15%. So it probably deserves some carpet going in, really. It needs to be refreshed. And so being in property costs money. It's just, you have to have some money available for you to spend on repairs and carpet and all sorts of things. I mean, the property that we've carpeted, we've probably spent about £35,000 on because a tenant absolutely trashed it. So sometimes this sort of thing happens, and you have to spend the money on doing it. Let me show you what it looks like today, because it's a beautiful, glorious day today. So here we are at the house. There's the beautiful sunshine, and it's looking pretty nice, to be honest with you. And there's the beach just down there, so that's pretty cool. Let's go back. So what else have we spent money on this week? So we had a situation where we tried to get into one of the houses, and for whatever reason the keys just didn't work. It was getting a new boiler, gas certificate and a service, and then the boiler man couldn't actually get into the property, which is really frustrating. So then we have to put him back, then we have to put the cleaners back, and we've got a tenant moving in, and it's like, these are the small things that no one ever talks about on courses. You know, you go on these training courses and we talk about only the good things, you know, and little things like keys not working, usually that's not an issue, but when you're 1,000 miles away, it's you that has to go and try and fix that somehow from afar, and then you have to rely on other people, and as you know, other people are pretty useless, right? So nobody understands something as much as you understand it, and so that can be really frustrating sometimes. So now I have to get a handyman in to replace the locks, which he's doing this weekend. Then I have to rebook the gas cert guy, then I have to rebook the cleaning lady who's going in to give the carpets a once over, and then we have to organise for a tenant to move into this other house. And this other house was rented out at I think it was $10.95, and we've upped that rent to $16.95 because that's just the way that it's going right now with property. Rental prices are going crazy, and so I think today's podcast, today's live video will just be about, it's not a live video, is it? Today's video will just be about property, and we're going to talk about property and some of the problems that we face on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, and what we do to solve them when we live so far away here in Spain. The other thing I should probably say as well is we've got a viewing today at 11 o'clock, and it's for a studio apartment. We had it on at 750. It's not renting at that, so we put it down to 695. 750 was ambitious, but we did have it rented at 750 for 6 months, and that was up from 650. So anyway, if we get it rented at 695, we can probably let you know if we got that rented throughout the day, which would be quite useful for you guys to see. So in order to combat, you know, the problem of living overseas in Spain and having all these properties that you have to manage, is that you've really got to start building systems. And building systems takes time, but as well as building systems, you need the people to implement those systems. So you've got to start building relationships as well. So people like plumbers, property managers, handymen, painters and decorators, and so on. And then what we normally do is we have a number of those. So we won't just have one handyman, for example, because what tends to happen with a handyman is eventually they're just going to let you down. So you want a couple of handymen, and then you just rotate the business that you give to them, depending on the type of business that you need them to do as well. Because, for example, some handymen will be really good at plastering or bricklaying or plumbing, and others will be really good at electrics or painting and decorating or putting doors on, right? So you'll get to know who's good at doing what for your properties. But then eventually what happens is that the handymen, I don't really understand why this happens, but the handymen then just seem to think, well, I've gone from X pounds an hour and I'm going to stick an extra £5 an hour on that because I'm doing all of Dan's work and he needs me, right? So then what they start doing is they kind of start taking the mick a little bit with their pricing, and then they start getting lazy, and then they start kind of dictating to you what needs to be done. And so you've really got to ensure that you have these what we would call boundary conditions. And a boundary condition is like a solid thick line, so that they know what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. And it's like with children. Handymen are children, basically. You have to let them know who's boss, basically. I'm saying it in a roundabout way, but you have to let them know who's boss, and they will from time to time try and pull the wool over your eyes if you don't maintain that boss stroke employee, not that they're employees, but tight relationship. And so if you can do that, you'll get more out of your workers. But also you should have them on rotation. You should never just rely on just one handyman, because invariably, obviously they go on holiday, but invariably they'll let you down at some point. Just when you need them the most is when they put the prices up. And so you just got to have that covered. So, you know, again, no one really talks about this in property events. You know, I've spoken at a lot of property events and I've actually never even spoken about it. It's not exciting, it's not sexy, it's not any of those things. But it is absolutely useful that this stuff is thought about in terms of what systems you're going to put in place. Like, for example, we've got a tenant moving in, and they're moving in on the 12th of this month, and I think today's the 6th. So we've got 6 days. This is the house where we couldn't get access because of the keys. So then, now we've got to get the cleaner in, now we've got to get the gas cert guy. The keys have been replaced this weekend. So that's 3 different people that we have to organise. The cleaner, the gas cert guy, and the handyman who's actually going to change over the keys. Now, the locks. Now also, in addition to that, I don't want the gas engineer to get there and find there's no gas, or the gas has run out of meter credit, or whatever is going to happen. So at the same time, we ask our handyman, can you switch the gas on, turn the boiler on, just make sure that it fires up? Because if not, I would rather him diagnose that than me having to then get my plumber, who's expensive, because plumbers are expensive, having to diagnose it, when my handyman is much, much cheaper. So you want to get that so that when the plumber actually gets there, he's literally just going in and he's servicing the boiler, and he's doing the gas certificate, you know, the safety certificate, and he's checking the other appliances and so on. You just want to absolutely dot the I's and cross the T's. I always get that mixed up. Because if you don't do that, invariably something's going to come and bite you on the ass. And this is property we're talking about, right? So in property, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And your job is to ensure that all these little bits are done, so that when the guy actually gets there, he can just go and do his job. Because if not, like what happened yesterday or the day before, he gets there, then can't actually get into the building because the keys don't work. Like, should we have checked the keys? I mean, we've had these same keys for like 15 years. We have had a few problems with a few dodgy keys. But these actual keys are the original keys that I've had for like 15 years. And so we've never had a problem, but now suddenly we've got a problem. So, you know, obviously sometimes you can't stop that. It's impossible to stop that. And I understand that, right? We can't cover every contingency, but we can cover most of them. So that one we probably couldn't do, but we don't want the gas engineer getting there on a Monday to find that there's no gas, it's run out of credit. Now he's the one who has to go to the local shop and add more credit onto it, and so on and so forth. We just want him to turn up, do the blooming gas cert, do the safety cert, and then, you know, hand the keys back in, and then we can get a cleaner in the next day, or even later that afternoon. And that reminds me, I need to message a cleaner. So that's it. That's as simple as it should be. And then when the tenants are moving in on Friday, hopefully that should be a smooth process. One of the things I absolutely hate is when the process isn't smooth. Like, we've not done something, we've not checked something. You know, my property manager, I want them to go before Friday to make sure, for example, on this one, we put new carpets in, and I think one of the doors hasn't been put back on. and that's not acceptable. So we need to get the handyman, we can get him to check that today. Is the door back on? Because if the door isn't back on, we need to get him to put that back on, because it needs to be ready for the tenants to move into. We want the oven to be checked to make sure that that works as well before the gas engineer gets there. There's all these little things that has to be done to ensure a smooth process. And normally, if I lived in the UK, I'd be at the house. I could look at the door, I could get the gas on, I could fix the keys, but I'm not there. And so I have to rely on other people. And you know, one of the things I get really frustrated with sometimes is the handyman and my property managers and the gas engineers. I tell them, look, you are my eyes and ears. If you spot something, don't ignore it. Don't ignore it for the tenant to move in and go, oh, well, this door's not being put back on. It's like, why did nobody tell me about this before? It drives me mad. So we have to continually remind people, this is what I want you to do. You are my eyes and ears. I don't want surprises. I hate surprises. I would love in property to have 0 surprises. Obviously, we don't live in that world. Okay, we're just going to horse riding, so we'll catch up with you at horse riding. Come on in. Out the little studio apartment, so that's good, and they'll move it in the next couple of days. Now we have to do right to rent checks. We have to check that they have they're allowed to rent in the UK, but we actually don't do any of that. We get open rent to do it. I mean, we do it, we just don't do it ourselves. We use open rent, and you know what, honestly, open rent, we just get open rent to do everything. We even pay the £5 or £10, whatever it is, for them to collect the rent, because then they keep sending them emails if they're late on the rent. But they take care of deposit protection, sending the right to rent checks, all of that. And so that's actually why we do it. We don't manage, we don't use, what do we call it, a lettings agency to do any of the management on our properties, because they just take a lot of money. You know, when you've got a lot of properties, 10% of a lot of properties is a heck of a lot of money. So we just do it all ourselves. And so using open rent is a small cost for making life so much easier. And that's definitely one of the things that's helped now that we live overseas and have done for 10 years. And it took some time actually to get into the habit of actually using open rent, because I used to do it all myself. I just used to do everything, you know, and we actually didn't even take deposits at one point. I just couldn't be bothered putting them in a deposit protection scheme. And now we do take them, but we get open rent to do it, because it's all completely automatic, and that's why we do it. One of the downsides of open rent is that very rare will a tenant pass referencing. I mean, I don't know why, but their criteria for a tenant to actually physically pass referencing, I just don't really understand it. So often a tenant will fail referencing for totally random reasons that I can't even kind of fathom, quite frankly. So we just take them anyway. It just means any rent guarantee insurance is invalid, not that we have that. Although we did mess about with getting rent guarantee insurance as well, but we found that it was just an additional expense, and we would never actually use the insurance anyway, so why bother with the additional expense? And then because people kept failing referencing because of open rents, I don't know what it is, bizarre way that they do referencing, nobody ever passes, and so we were just spending money for no reason at all, because we couldn't use a damn thing. So anyway, we use open rent. So now that we found a tenant, the tenant moving in and the tenant getting all the paperwork done is really, really easy, just because we use open rent. So you should be using open rent for your properties as well, if you just want to kind of remove all the headaches and things.